Call the meeting to order at 4:01. We have Bob Bastinto co-chair, Roy Gott co-chair, Mark Perka, Mike Summer, and Tom Toll for the committee. We have Jeff Nevins for Mission Broadband and David Good also for Mission Broadband. And Hall J, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Janice Hall. I have a summer residence in Gouldsboro on Summer Harbor Road. And I'm trying to be there and work there for months on end. But my work isn't happy with my current internet situation. They're giving me grief about it. So I'm hoping that we can improve the area.
Well, thank you for showing up, and yeah, I hope so. So let's jump right into it. September 27th, 2023 meeting minutes. Did all the committee members get a chance to review those?
Yes. Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the minutes as written. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Was that on your part, Bob? Was that an aye? I didn't see you. Okay, thank you. All right, update on action steps from prior meeting, RFP preliminary evaluation. And this will be very preliminary. I'm going to let Jeff sort of take the lead on this.
Thanks, Roy. I first want to introduce David Good. David is a colleague of mine at Mission Broadband, and David will be working with you folks because I'm actually going to retire and not work part-time or any time. So I'm going to be done here in a couple of 3 weeks. I'm going to work with you through the summary process of the RFP, and David will be working with you from that point forward, or from this point forward. So David will be handling everything. What I want to do is just give you a brief overview of the RFP. We sent it out to 9 different providers in across the state, and we got 2 responses. And Roy and I were talking a little bit before the call here, and we were somewhat surprised that there weren't more. I think part of it, we can talk about the reasons for it, but there was a response from Spectrum, from Charter, and essentially Spectrum said that they would be willing to work with you all on a line extension effort, and that would just be extending the network that's in place to those unserved or underserved locations that still exist in Gouldsboro and Winter Harbor. And they didn't give any financial cost. It was just basically a letter that outlined their program to upgrade that they're currently undertaking in the state of Maine, and their willingness to sit and work with you on a line extension effort to reach all of the unserved and underserved locations in the 2 towns. And we'll be sharing all this with you, and you'll get to see the actual responses. And we will also be working on a summary, which will just try to capsulize everything that was in the 2 presentations, or 2 proposals. The second proposal that came in was from Consolidated, and Consolidated did give some numbers, and I'm going to round them off, but I'm going to give you some numbers in terms of what their proposal had in it. And they had a couple of different proposals for you to consider. One would be that you would go through the bond funding process. And the total cost that they estimated was for the two towns was approximately $5.1 million. And because of the fact that they have the RDOF program, which they are going to have to do some upgrades in both of the towns. And that's a program, that's an FCC program that's been in place now, I think it's about 3 years. And they will be doing some upgrades in the two towns. So they're already going to be investing some money in the two towns. So the balance of the bond, once you take off what they're going to have to do as part of the RDOF program, was 1.2 million. Did I say 5.1? It's 5.2. 5.2 million was the estimate. 1.2 is approximately what they're going to be doing with the RDOF program to build out to those locations that are part of the RDOF build out. And the balance would be approximately $4 million. And they offered to work with you to go to try to secure funding to bridge that $4 million. And also they offered a proposal, which I believe they've used in New Hampshire and in some towns in Maine also, where they would bond for the 4 million. The towns would have to take out a bond in the total of 4 million, and they would institute what they call a user fee. And the user fee would be collected by Consolidated, and that would go towards paying off the monthly payment on the bond. And they've used this in other places. They used it in Chesterfield, New Hampshire. And they indicated that the user fee is in their experience, is somewhere between $3 and $15. And that would be added on in addition to what individuals would be paying for their internet connection. And there was an agreement in the proposal that I have not had a chance to look at. So I don't know the details of how that agreement would work and what the requirements would be for the towns. But that's something we will be looking at and providing more detail in terms of the financial agreement that you would have to enter into if you were to take this route and utilize bond funding and take them up on their offer. So those two proposals came from Consolidated. Both Consolidated and Spectrum offered to sit and discuss their proposals with the committee and answer any questions and try to explain the details of what it is that they had proposed. And I'll leave it at that at this point, because that's a very high level. David, I don't know if you want to add anything more, but that, because David has also had a chance here to look at it. We didn't get the proposals, incidentally, until the 11th hour. The deadline was 5 o'clock. And I think one of them came in at 4 o'clock and one of them came in earlier in the day on Monday. So that's fairly typical of RFPs. They typically don't come in far in advance of the deadline.
Question, Jeff?
Yes.
You said that Consolidated had basically two proposals or two.
Yeah.
I somehow missed that there were two in there.
Two ways, Mike, to fund the project. One would be through grants and exploring grant opportunities through the MCA. Obviously, that would be the BEAD program that's going to be coming up next year. So they would work with you in conjunction with the MCA to secure some funding to offset that 4 million. I don't know if they could secure the full 4 million. There is some money that has been allocated at the county level. I think we talked about this back a while. But there are ARPA monies available to you. And how that would fold into the BEAD program, I'm not sure at this point. Or if it would even, in terms of the timing and the requirements that go with the ARPA program, if that would work in terms of the timeframes. The other proposal would be that they would work with you to secure bond funding for that $4 million and utilize a user fee to pay off the monthly payment on the bond. So there's two different proposals. One is to go after grants, and the other one is to use a bond funding mechanism to pay off the $4 million balance for the fiber to the premise network in the two towns.
But it sounds like those wouldn't necessarily be mutually exclusive, right? If you needed to use both to come up with the $4 million, you could.
You may have to, Mike, in reality, because of the coverage that you already have, that would not be eligible for funding through the BEAD program.
That would be in the areas that are served by Spectrum, correct?
Yeah. Typically that has, and it all depends on the funding source and the criteria for the funding. And BEAD is still somewhat of an evolving process here. So I'm not sure that I can speak to the final criteria for BEAD, but it would have to match up with whatever the criteria was. And typically in the past, those areas that have been served by Spectrum were not eligible for funding. And as you know, you've got a pretty significant part of both towns that are served by Spectrum. And as typically they're sort of the center of the towns, and with the outlining areas not being well served.
So just to follow on Mike's thought, I think that would be a discussion that if we were to sit down with Consolidated, it would make sense to have, to find the funding opportunities for the eligible areas and a potential match from Hancock County if that money is still available, and then look to do bond funding on the balance. I think that's basically how we were probably going to look at approaching it anyway, mentally. Find all the funding opportunities and then look at debt mechanisms after that to cover the rest of it. Does anybody else want to speak to I know you'd asked if David had anything. Do you have anything to add, David?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is I just got a glimpse of the responses and the RFP starting yesterday, so I really have more to do there. But what I did notice was both of those, as you probably can imagine, are private companies that do not support a BUD. And I know in the RFP, I think your preference was for respondents to respond and support a BUD. So it's just something to think about. It's preliminary comment. Just, wanted to point that out. That's the only thing I think, Jeff, you might have just not mentioned.
And that's something I know in the Consolidated RFI response that we got, they did mention the possibility of building and turning over the network to the communities for that model. with an exclusivity agreement. So it'd be interesting. I don't know, maybe if it's just buried in the details, be interesting to see if that's still something they're interested in, or if that was completely taken out of the response, but not
Roy, I
to,
think, Roy,
yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
it's similar to what you had seen in the RFI. As I mentioned earlier, I have not had a chance to read the agreement, so I don't know the details behind it, but I believe it was very similar to what you saw when they talked initially through the RFI process.
Yeah, that would make sense. So I think once you send those out to us, we'll be able to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and see what they have to say. And for those of us on the committee, we just need to make sure we keep these responses to ourselves. They're not for public distribution, certainly not at this time. Correct, Jeff?
Yes.
I do know that Time Warner Spectrum has confidential written all over theirs, and I've been through a couple of these with them, and they're sticklers about the confidentiality of a lot of that information. So I would just reiterate, Roy, your point that, you just got to be careful. So
To that point, and this is not to be dismissive, but it sounds like the response from Spectrum Charter does not meet the requirements of the RFP. It does not meet the requirements of the committee, because the expansion of the network that you've described there, that's their cable network, not a fiber network, correct?
Great question. I've been on a couple of these where they have committed to fiber in the unserved areas. And then in the underserved, they've committed to what they call their hybrid, I guess, which is partly coaxial, partly fiber. I don't remember reading that in this particular offer, I guess you could call it. But I would agree with you that they didn't meet the RFP requirements either. But that would be a question for them. I would encourage you to interview them. I mean, whether they meet the requirements or not, I think it would behoove to interview them. And that's a question you could ask, is just say, look, we're looking at broadband and fiber, broadband, high speed. What's your answer?
And it sounds like it's not a particularly long letter, which probably wouldn't have taken them all the way to the deadline to be able to submit, but any case, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the RFPs? Anybody?
Roy, I also would add it's a very similar response to the RFP that the city of Eastport did. So I don't know if that makes you feel any better or worse, but it's
As in
very,
they didn't get many responses either.
no, they didn't. I think they had 3. So one more than what you got, but the third one really wasn't a response. It was more a PowerPoint presentation that a company offered up. So they didn't have a lot of detail either.
I would add one more thing, Roy, sorry. I took the liberty to call 2 of the ISPs that did not respond, because I've worked with them pretty closely and other things, just to ask why they didn't. And it really boiled down to, as you can imagine, that the business case just wasn't there for either. And that was GWI and Matrix, by the way, that I called. And GWI would support a utility district. They have done it before, but they couldn't make the numbers work. So that's my last comment.
Mark?
Yeah, that actually answers a lot of my question. I was just wondering if anybody had any speculation as to why we only had, out of 9 providers, the RFP was sent to and only 2 responses. And I think that kind of speaks to some of it. Some of the other providers may have run the numbers, so to speak, and didn't pan out for them. Who knows? They may have, plenty of other, if you will, construction projects already underway and too much in the pipeline, maybe. I don't know. Hard to say.
Actually, Mark, that was part of Matrix answer, was the time, they don't have the time right now, and and they didn't have the business case to do it, so.
Yeah.
So probably if they were hungrier for work, it might have made more sense to do it, but right
Right.
now it definitely doesn't. So, okay.
Yeah.
Other
The other,
thoughts?
Roy, one other thing that I would mention is that I believe, and I did talk with Danny Sullivan during the process, and Danny expressed to me the frustration that they had with the RFP, and was the RDOF situation in the towns, and sort of the unknown with that RDOF program, because essentially it takes away nearly half of the eligible locations that you have in the two towns. And they're designated to be built to. So he just basically expressed some frustration that's a huge unknown. And it really was difficult to sort of get beyond that.
Anyone else?
So, where can we get information about the RDOF and how do you spell that?
It's an acronym.
I figured it was.
Yeah, I'll send you all some information and background on it. And I think, Roy, back a while, and I can get my hands on it. I sent you a map that shows the areas in the two towns that are going to be part of this RDOF program. So I'll send you some information, Tom, so you can see where they're proposing to build, or
Okay.
where they have been awarded money to build, and some background information on the program.
Thank you.
So,
It's the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. That's what RDOF is.
Okay.
and so Jeff, you mentioned that in Consolidated's proposal, that's a $5.2 million total project size, of which 1.2 million would be covered by RDOF
That's
expansion.
correct.
So if they are expanding under RDOF, is it going to be to the standard that we're arguing for, basically? That it's going to be fiber if they expand, basically?
Yes.
Okay.
The only way that they can meet the 100 over 100 requirement of the RDOF program is to build fiber.
So basically, if we do this, I don't know that it accelerates it, but potentially it may, eventually they were going to do this anyway, but if we push this project forward, it would make sense for them to do it all at the same time, basically.
It did. And they did mention in the proposal, one of the things that I took away, that the calendar for doing this would be moved up if you went in that direction.
Anyone else? Well, I guess we'll wait to see what your summary is. I mean, it won't be much of a comparison. It'll just basically be the letter
Right.
and one proposal or set of proposals in the case of Consolidated. And so then what would,
Sorry, Roy. Well,
Go ahead.
I do have a pretty good relationship with the Charter folks. I actually worked for Time Warner for 20 years, and then they bought Time Warner, so I still have a lot of connections there. And my point for saying that is that the last time they did this, they just sent a letter. I mean, I got back to them and said, it's not enough. You need to come to the table with a little bit more information for these folks, because there's no comparison. And I think it just takes a little kind of kick in the shins on my part to maybe get them to at least provide some estimates that would give you folks a better idea of a choice. I guess that's my point.
well, certainly if you can prod them a little bit just to see, because I would assume they would want the business. So I would hope they would put a little bit of effort in to try and persuade us to consider giving them the business. But so what would you say, outside of getting that information back to us and reaching back out to Spectrum to see what what their level of interest is in a little bit more detail. What would you say are our next steps at this point, just to set up some times to meet with the respondents?
Look, sequentially, I think let us get the summary together, get the summary and the proposals back to you so you all can familiarize yourselves and look at it. And then I think concurrently with that, David and I can start reaching out to CCI and Spectrum and set up some meetings so you can get with them and ask some questions and hopefully, as David said, get some more information about their proposal and CCI's also.
And we typically, when we get to that point, we Mission Broadband will provide, excuse me, we'll provide you first an example of questions, and a lot of them are technical, and what I would ask you to do once you see these, if there's just anything outside of those questions that you want to see on that list, we would just place that on the list. Most times we send it out to the ISP in advance to give them preparation time to do it, to come up with the answers, which is really, again, you may say, why would we do that? Let's see what they have to say on the moment. But I think it actually benefits the group here if they were able to structure their answers in a way that, would help you. So.
Bob, I see you're unmuted. Do you want to?
Well, yeah, I both Jeff and Dave, I agree 100%. We got some reading to do. Looking forward to the summary on that. Yeah, it's time to come see Jesus, so to speak. So, I mean, Dave, I work for Spectrum as well in the enterprise group. So I understand the challenges.
Sure.
Hybrid fiber cable. You're right. Right now it's unresponsive and it doesn't meet the needs. Symmetric requirement. So they would be out of spec.
And there's also the battery backup, and you can argue that all day long too. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean I think I'd probably be good to digest everything, formulate the questions, and then have a sit down.
Yep.
Yep. Those are
And
my
we
only
can,
comments.
And, I'll just say, I think it makes perfect sense to send the questions to them ahead of time, because we're not trying to trap them or trick them. We want actual substantive answers. And if we want answers, they should have the questions. So
yep.
no,
Good
that makes sense to me. So we'll wait to hear from you, but we're not going to be scheduling anything, any time to sit down with them or Zoom with them before the next meeting. Then you wouldn't expect then, correct? A month away.
I wouldn't expect it to happen before that.
Okay.
I wouldn't. I mean, I'm not even sure we could do it before Thanksgiving, but we could.
Right.
If we're in a hurry, we could push for it.
The only thing personally that I would say that we are on any sort of deadline for is whenever the next round of funding becomes available, we want to be ready to apply. We want to have our ducks in a row by then. That's my deadline.
And that would be your bead, your bead stuff, which I will echo Jeff. I like to consider myself an expert, but I can barely figure out what they're gonna do. And we're trying to figure it out. But
and Roy, I think to address your timing issue, I think you're in a good space in terms of having done the RFP and starting to get your ducks in order and going through this process of reviewing these two proposals that you got with the two companies, and then you'll have sufficient time to get yourself in a good position for the BEAD funding. application process.
Hey, Roy and Bob, I've got a logistics question, I guess. The membership of this committee has been a little bit loosey-goosey, let's say. You're never quite sure who's going to attend and whatnot. I'm just wondering who's going to receive copies of this RFP response, and how are we going to control the confidentiality issue here?
Well, certainly, I mean, our membership right now is the the five of us that are here on this call, plus Sandy Fortin and Rhiannon, who obviously Rhiannon and Sandy haven't been here for a couple meetings. That's the membership of the committee as it stands right now. That would be the most of the individuals that I would say we would provide access to the response at this point. Once it is shared, unfortunately, there's nothing that really prevents a person from acting contrary to the guidelines, but that's something that just needs to be clearly stated, and I'm not sure there's much more we can
Yeah.
do beyond that.
Well, do we want to have an NDA agreement?
What's that, Bob?
Do we want to have a non-disclosure agreement?
With all the members?
Yeah,
That
I don't-
seems a little much to me. I would ask the members to in good faith honor the confidentiality. I don't believe that Sandy or Rhiannon or anybody here would intentionally distribute this. I think the people that are involved want to be involved for the right reason, and I don't think there's any benefit to anybody on this committee to share this. So
I wasn't thinking of them doing it egregiously, but you know, we're here hearing it today. They're not hearing this, and I just want to be sure when we distribute it, that's clearly stated right up front that this is confidential. And
we can be very explicit and clear about that, that's for sure, when we distribute it. Jeff, you'll probably just send me the documents, and then I will forward
Yes.
them to the committee members.
And we'll,
And
we'll-
I'll do that directly rather than using the group, because the group has non-committee members on it as well.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
all right. That's-
I'll just mention that, so I agree, an NDA probably is not needed because, and I haven't come across that within the committees I've worked with, but what happens is eventually you'll have to go to the town council. And that's where things get a little sticky, because town council meetings are all public record. And
Mhm.
we've had a couple of committees that have actually, provided that information, and then it's gotten public. And it is what it is. And at that point, Spectrum and Consolidated can do all they want and kick their heels up about confidentiality, but at some point the information gets out, but usually not by the committee, I guess is the point.
All right, so as far as the RFP goes, we'll wait to see what we get back from Mission Broadband, and then we will move forward from there. I did get a response back from Danny about the poll licensing question, and he says it is a monthly recurring fee per poll, which I have to imagine it's pretty small, because otherwise it would be very untenable to continue licensing indefinitely, but that is his response to that. Gouldsboro, Winter Harbor, I don't have anything specific for them or information gathering. Communication plans, there were two little blurbs that went into the two town newsletters, or were provided at least. I believe they are going to be in there. And we don't really, I guess Dan did not make it today, so I'm not sure that we're going to do much planning on a mailer, but we also don't have a lot of information at this point on the RFP. So I guess there's not much to plan for with the mailer, so. Anybody have any thoughts on any of those items?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, we're one step further, but not a huge step, if you will.
I think we can maybe work on some of the details for what the mailer would be once we get some information here from the RFP process. And obviously not providing anything in a way that's derived directly from the responses, but just, again, summary information and let people know where we're at. I guess the only thing that comes to mind, Jeff, and more for David, since this will be your show going forward, is I'm gonna talk with Julie Ginn over at the Steuben Town Office. There is no consolidated, there's no Spectrum in Steuben. It's on Route 1. And we didn't get any bites on working with the neighboring communities, it sounds like, but it may be worth bringing up in our discussion with the respondents that there's an opportunity to do other towns as well. So Jeff, if you have the opportunity, you or David, to highlight areas, because there might be RDOF areas in Steuben as well. But
Yeah.
it might just be another good town to bring along and expand the project, and maybe something that will be cost effective and helpful. We'll see.
As far as a grant too, typically what the MCA has done, and with the last couple of rounds, is it's all about percentages, right? So it's unserved and underserved. So if you're the bigger you can make your underserved percentage grow, the more likely you'll qualify for grant. So I would agree with you. If you could get other communities that have less penetration of served, then it would bolster your grant.
More grant money is better, right?
Yes,
Mhm.
sir.
And Roy, I'd also say that as we get closer to the end of the year here and into the first of next year, you'll have a lot better feel for what BEAD is going to look like and how they're going to set up the criteria for applying for the monies.
I do know that Consolidated is doing some sign up for, they're not offering service, but they're gauging interest in Franklin. So they're looking at the area. And so, Franklin, they may actually hit Franklin before Franklin gets a chance to advance its broadband effort anyway. So we'll see. Was it for their Fidium brand again? Consolidated response.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Yep.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else from anybody,
I'm going to say, give us a couple of weeks to get something in front of you folks.
Yep.
I've got a few other things. Jeff's piling some more stuff on me, so we'll see how that goes.
well, our next meeting is tentatively set for right now on Wednesday, November 29th at 4.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
that'll give you a full 4 weeks.
yeah, we certainly can get that's doable. Absolutely.
Yep.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time and look forward to that documentation.
Yeah, nice to meet you
All right.
folks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye
David.
now.
Oh,
Thank you.
motion to adjourn, anyone?
Motion to adjourn. Second that.
All in favor? Thank you.
Bye now.